Some beginning notes. I'm going to talk about the beginnings of the people of God, or ancient Israel, as we, because it is our history. It is the beginning of our place in the salvation history that is Christianity today. Now, the people of God are those who confess the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. Those people are manifested today in Christianity, Judaism, and Islam, and you can make arguments for others. But for the purposes of this exercise, I'm talking about they are us. My son-in-law and I went to a company in Jackson, Mississippi several years ago to install a satellite internet system on a command trailer at a hazmat cleanup company. I saw that trailer again during the '93 floods in Cedar Rapids. I got another chance to visit with a really nice bunch of people. When we met them, they were talking about American football, and my son-in-law, who grew up in Poland, began to tell them about European soccer. The World Cup was underway. After listening to his accent for a couple of minutes, one said to him, "You're not from around here, are you?" He was right. But then neither are we. We may have been born here, lived here all our life, and know every square inch of our surroundings. But we're not from around here. Christianity isn't the faith we belong to, or even the most important thing in our lives. Christianity is who we are. When you say, "I'm a Christian," you enter a stream of people who go back far beyond a few generations. We are a drop in the stream that goes back thousands of years. To be a Christian defines identity far deeper than any other identity. We're a community of memory, and our roots go far deeper than any other alliance or land. We are not from here. So let's take some time to look back on our history. As a people, we began in Egypt. So how did we get there? You remember the story of Joseph and the jealousy of his brothers. That's where it all started. You remember that Joseph was Jacob's favorite, being born in Jacob's old age, like a grandparent and a grandchild. You know about his coat of many colors and how he was sent out to check on his brothers at Shechem. When he arrived, they had gone to the plain of Dothan in the rich grazing land near the Jezreel Valley. Genesis 37:14. Joseph came to Shechem, and a man found him wandering in the fields. The man asked him, "What are you seeking?" "I'm seeking my brothers," he said. "Tell me, please, where they are pasturing the flock." The man said, "They've gone away, for I heard them say, 'Let us go to Dothan.'" So Joseph went after his brothers and found them at Dothan. They saw him from a distance, and before he came near to them, they conspired to kill him. They said one to another, "Here comes this dreamer. Come now, let us kill him and throw him into one of the cisterns. Then we will say that the wild animal has devoured him, and we shall see what will become of his dreams." But when Reuben heard it, he delivered him out of their hands, saying, "Let us not take his life." Reuben said to them, "Shed no blood. Throw him into this cistern here in the wilderness, but lay no hand on him, so that he might rescue him out of their hand and restore him to his father." So when Joseph came to his brothers, they stripped him of his robe, the long robe with sleeves that he wore, and they took him and threw him into a cistern. The pit was empty. There was no water in it. Then they sat down to eat, and looking up, they saw a caravan of Ishmaelites coming from Gilead with their camels, carrying gum, balm, and resin on their way to carry it down to Egypt. Then Judah said to his brothers, "What profit is it if we kill our brother and conceal his blood? Come, Let us sell him to the Ishmaelites and not lay our hands on him, for he is our brother, our own flesh." And his brothers agreed. When some Midianite traders passed by, they drew Joseph up, lifting him out of the pit, and sold him to the Ishmaelites for 20 pieces of silver. And they took Joseph to Egypt. And, of course, if we're getting ahead of ourselves, we are thinking about Jesus being sold into death for 30 pieces of silver. Or is it life? Joseph is taken out of the Dothan plain. He's taken from Dothan plain down across the rich plain, down farther to the south. And when you go down farther to the south, you end up in the area of Egypt. In Egypt, they finally get to the garden. Paradise, everything is beautiful down there. Joseph succeeds and becomes a prince. There's a famine in the land, as he had predicted, and all of Jacob's family says, "We ought to go down to Egypt to get something." And so, they're going where you don't trust God, where you have everything in hand. They leave this dry land, go down there in Egypt. The movement of Judah, who began in the sparse south, therefore it is crucial because it's a movement toward fertility that you control. First to the rich northern valley, then to Egypt, in a movement away from the gift. It's a movement away from this semi-desert where God is fertility to where you control fertility. It's an old story. If I can get myself out of here, get myself there, then I have made myself something in this world. If I can just move closer to the country club, if I can get a job in Silicon Valley. We're going to skip the story of Judah and Tamar for now. Suffice it to say that Judah is attempting to move from the southern highlands closer to the riches, and is willing to employ magic in his quest to control his life. The next move that we have shows you precisely the second move of our people. One move is to get tired of the southern ridge, and the first move in this way, toward the plain. The second move is north. We said when we were laying this out that it was in the north, that as you go further north, everything gets better. And that Shechem becomes a symbol of the better land in the middle of the country. It's got wheat around it. And it even gets better until we get to the other plain, way up here in the north of the country. In the move toward Egypt, the Joseph story is most important because it starts with a dream. The dream is about wheat. Right there, you have what wheat symbolizes, which is power. The one having wheat is the prince. Then the famine turns the high country, formerly just survivable, into a desert. What you want to do is get out of the vacuum into life. He takes his sheep. Why do they go up north? Not so they can just have sheep, but so they can have the most sheep, grow a bigger corporate farm, get more, hold more. Judah is always moving towards the plain, moving toward money, wealth, guaranteed possessions, constancy. In the wealth of the northern plain, we get the brothers who are jealous because they don't want one brother possessing or holding over them. So they throw him down into a cistern. What they want is money. Why kill him if you can make a couple bucks? This is the self-centeredness, this holding and possessing. And they sell him. The people they sell him to were coming in from the east, and they move from the west into Dothan Plain, and they go down to Egypt. That's the way they would go. Those are Ishmaelites. They are always trouble. And you see, they are desert people. And then you come on down, and that leads down toward Egypt. So, who starts the Exodus and who is responsible for our captivity? Judah. That is crucial. The Bible lets that in, which really shows you how fair it is. It is Judah who starts the death that leads to life. He is responsible for the whole Exodus. This area of the Dothan, just next to the Jezreel, is called the Machir, which means sold. Joseph belongs to the north. He is Israel. Judah belongs to the south in terms of where their tribes settled. The south sells the north so it can get some money. The people of the high country, who are supposed to have donkeys and grapevines and all this nice life up on the high country dependent on God, are selling the north. And the way to Egypt by Joseph's captors is along the coast. We've finally gotten there. In other words, we have moved one step further. Joseph is now on the plain. We've made it as a slave. We tried to move to the plain. That was north. We lose. We don't really do anything but sell our brother. He's brought down through the plain and he is led down, and that is the most important. He's led down to what is the plain of the plain. And that is Egypt and the Nile River. What you have, first of all, is oxen turning the water wheels from the Nile, which is running here in the darkness, pulling up to irrigate the things in a land that is always green. Up here in the Negev, we have a land that is good for dry land farming. That is the type of farming that you have to worry about most. There is more faith in planting time out in parts of Arizona and Colorado than there is up in parts of Minnesota, certainly Pennsylvania. Those farmers are in church. So this is where you really have to trust. What God does is send a famine. There's no rain left. In a famine, you can do one of two things. You can stick it out, or as they did in the 30s in this country, you start heading to California. What is in California? Figs. In the San Joaquin Valley, it's greenness. Can't you see them? Get out of the Dust Bowl, go to California. So you go down to Egypt, and you are in, therefore, the plain of plains. This is what the high country is like in a good year. This is what Egypt is like all of the time. This is absolute gift. There is no possession. This is possession. One has all the trouble with water. One has no trouble with water. Minnesota versus Colorado. To understand the problem, it becomes, go to Genesis 46:34. Jacob is really worried about moving out of the high country and going down there. He knows there's a famine. He doesn't know whether he should do it. God says go. So that first of all, there is trust. The trust that you can go to this, but come back. Who has already done this? Abraham. Abraham has already gone down, but the difference between Abraham and Joseph is that when Abraham went down in times of famine, he always came back. He never got caught in it. He never started to run in its ways. He controlled it. So Jacob is told to go down. The Egyptians hated these people who came down and out. I think you can see very well when you go to Genesis 46:34, it says, "The men are shepherds, for they have been keepers of cattle, and they have brought their flocks and their herds and all that they have." When Pharaoh calls you and says, "What is your occupation?" you shall say, "Your servants have been keepers of cattle from our youth, even until now, both we and our fathers, in order that we may dwell in the land of Goshen. For every shepherd is an abomination to the Egyptians." Why are the shepherds an abomination to the Egyptians? The shepherds are the migrant farmers, the migrant workers. Shepherds represent these migrant people who came in, did the work, did enough to keep their stuff alive, and then you were supposed to get out. And you were always afraid that they would stay. And you have so much land, and you want to keep the land and control it, and you want to get the most out of the land. The land of Egypt is security. It is timelessness. It is ahistorical. You know the flood will come up, you know the flood will go down. Life will go on. There's no sense of history. You see it best in the pharaohs. This is Ramses II. The pharaoh was put in the tomb, and then the goal is to preserve him forever. The pharaoh represents the sun god because the sun comes up, the sun goes down, the sun comes up, the sun goes down, the flood comes up, the flood goes down, and you know things will always be green. That's exactly what we were not going to have in the high country. The plain is the worst place, the most difficult place to understand God. It's almost impossible. I don't know how you can understand God when you've got it all. Take me out to a part of Colorado, and you can understand God. So the more you move away from the high country, the more you move to a land where you would know that this year is good and next year is going to be good. It is a place of history where God comes in, God intervenes, God changes, God gives, God takes away. It's a total different understanding of things. Among the people of Egypt, there is no sense of this turning of stuff with God. A God who comes into history, intervenes, acts, changes, and the like. It's more cyclical. This thing just keeps moving on and on and on. It just moves in a line, undisturbed. You become a slave, wealth and slavery, because eventually the game gets to be how you manage. Finally, the wealth goes, and then you get to see how management works. 47:17 in Genesis, the Egyptians came to Joseph and they said, "Give us food. Why should we die before your eyes?" And Joseph answered, give your cattle, and I will give you food in exchange. He's playing the management game. How you keep the stability going when you lose it. And what did they give him? Notice how they run the things out. What is given first? Horses. Horses, you see. What is the first thing you can get rid of when it comes to life? You can get rid of your Mercedes, and then you start down towards your Yugo. We do this. You ask people when they get strapped, what are the first things to go? The second home. The last thing to go is the kitchen sink. You start down. So you've got horses first, and then the flocks and the herds. And what are the last things to go? Of course, the tractor, the donkey. You see how it is working economically, the whole story over and over again, but you're becoming more under the management of one person. You're now being managed like he tried to manage the land. What's the next thing that happens? They run out of everything, and the famine keeps going on. There's nothing left in their sight. So Joseph gave them food for all of these things. And then verse 18 says, "And when the year was ended, they came to him the following year, and they said to him, 'We will not hide from my Lord that our money is all spent, and the herds of cattle are my Lord's. There is nothing left in the sight of my Lord, but,' wait for it, 'our bodies and our lands.'" What's the next thing you want to sell? Your soul. You see how it works? We were free on the high country. God didn't demand anything, but we responded to the gift God gave, and we had nothing to hold. Now we have a monopoly of power that Pharaoh represents, and Joseph is doing the dirty business. He's giving everything to the head of the monopoly of power to keep this thing cycled. We finally get everybody enslaved. When we are just the other way around, the holy is possession. But possession is slavery. because survival in the end is going to take it all away from you. The gift giver of the high country is no longer there. Joseph realizes it in the end and says he wants to get out of there for good reasons. So Joseph leaves. Joseph is eventually brought back. Joseph comes all the way out. He comes around and he ends the Exodus, and he is buried up in Shechem. Joseph is buried up in Shechem. He's buried in the middle of the country at Shechem. The people are enslaved and they need to get out. The date that is usually given for the Exodus is 1250 BC. The reason that is usually given, because on the Merneptah stele, we find that there is a people and a place called Israel in the land in 1220 BC. And so the year 1250, somewhere around there, is given as the Exodus. In another context, we'll talk about the other Exodus in around 1500 BC. We're talking about the Exodus in terms of land. There are a couple of points that have to be made in terms of the coming out of Egypt. One point is simply that you kill life in the land of life as a way to try to show the people where the power is. That is, you send plagues to Egypt to show who God is. Our people choose to leave that, the plagues down there, as a way to come to life itself. What they choose is to go into death. They choose to go from a place where you have water, the plagues, into this desert area, which is death. That's the one side of it. The marvelous thing is we decided to go to the desert. I don't think we intended to go to the desert. It doesn't say this in the text, but I don't think that we really intended to go there. This is the area of a very swampy reed area. This is the Suez Canal. This is the Suez Canal, and this is all full of swamp. The Sea of Reeds, the route that you would normally take, would be what is called the Via Maris, the way of the sea. That's the way Joseph was brought down. Now, that would have been an impossible route for us to go along, simply because you have all of the troops of the Egyptians lying out along the way. So we couldn't go up north and move this way. So that forced us down somewhere in the middle here by the Great Lake, the Great Bitter Lake. And this is a very reedy area, very swampy area. It was more so before the Suez Canal was built. One of the most important things in the whole story is Exodus 12:38, which says, "Who came out of Egypt? A mixed crowd also went up with them, and livestock in great numbers, both flocks and herds. The people who came out of Egypt are a mixed multitude." It's not a race at all. This is not a pure people of God. That means that we have not an ethnic group. It was a people who were tired of being in slavery, who were tired of planned management and wanted a gift. It was the desert that would form them into a people. Now that's very important today. The church has never been a race. It's a people who want freedom. Interestingly, that place that is going to make you free is a desert. It's the desert that forms the people. That is crucial. The routes are debatable. The one route is up through the North Country. It's in through here. This is what it looks like. If they had come this way, they're heading to a place right here called Kadesh Barnea. This way looks like this. It's very sandy and not so difficult to go through, and you can see it's rather quick to get there, to Kadesh Barnea from here. So this is what it looks like. If that is the case, one of these mountains, these hills that you see, would be Sinai. These hills off to the right of it. So that's what it would look like. This is often, this peak here is pointed out as the Sinai of the north. Along this route is Kadesh Barnea. It is a green oasis, which is a really wonderful place. Kadesh Barnea has always been a green place in the middle of the desert. Whoever knows how to get there and everything about the area, you see, knows the inside back routes into the country. So Kadesh Barnea is important. To show you how important it is, that was on the Egyptian front until 1948. In 1948, the Israelis took it immediately. The first place they went down to get was Kadesh Barnea. So Kadesh Barnea is a jump-off point right before the Negev to the north of it, right before you enter in. As a point of information, because I think this becomes important, is Deuteronomy 2:14, which you should note. We were 40 years in the wilderness, that's true. But as it makes very clear in 2:14, we spent 38 of those years going from Kadesh Barnea in. That's crucial. We only spent 2 years in the Sinai. That's very important. And that makes sense, because when you look at this, you can't wander in this for 30 years. It's impossible. The second thing is we can't have more than a couple hundred people doing this. Thousands cannot be. It's just impossible. The reason that this northern route is often accepted, and I think it is the route, the quail, the birds, are often blown in. Quail are still trapped in that area as a supplemental source of income. The birds move out along here and they're blown in. Remember, we get quail at night to eat. So there is a remembrance of a route along here. The shortness of that and the ability to move at least a number of people seems much more reasonable to down here. For the short time involved, reasonable too. But that's one route. You can put your money down and take your choice. The other route, of course, is still crucial today. To show you how crucial it is, the Israelis in 1967 blocked the exit out of this, so that on one hand the Egyptians were going this way to attack Israel. They blocked the exit on one side, and then they dropped their troops down and took the Suez Canal. And they refused for 4 days to let the Red Cross drop water. And what resulted is not blown up stuff, it's just burned out, dead, dried Holocaust victims. This is a terrible place. So if you can shut the route off on that side, and that side you just let them burn out there, so that's the retreat route. That's there. You still see it today. When you go down there, everybody can see bones sticking up out of the thing, where people just died. So that's the one route. Another route would be the route through the Sinai itself, the more popular route, which is seen down here into the Mount Sinai area, and then back up to Kadesh Barnea. That seems to be an awful lot of wandering around to get to Kadesh Barnea. This is Mount Sinai. This is St. Catherine's, the monastery below. It's in these high granite hills that there have been a lot of holy places. I doubt this is Mount Sinai, because it was the church that put this there in the first place, and they chose an Arab holy place. It was put up at the Transfiguration, which they had moved down here into the Sinai. So I don't think this is the place anyway. If you get over there, that's what the top of Mount Sinai looks like. And if you look up over this desolate land, that's what it looks like at sunrise. Because everybody always wants to go up and have Eucharist at sunrise on Mount Sinai. What I have just shown you is called the Yeshimon, which is best translated the howling waste. Negev is dry land. You see, in English we just say desert. There's a big difference. There is a Yeshimon, the only way from Kadesh Barnea when you have pressure on the north, as you did, was back out, constantly to live in the Yeshimon. So we experience through at least 2 of our years, through all of those times in this crucial formation period of life in the Yeshimon. Now, so that we don't romanticize all of this, let me just make the point very strongly. Deserts are not romantic places to go and think about God. That's romance. Deserts are dangerous places. The thing about desert is you can't carry anything extra or you're in trouble. You've got to learn to respect the desert. You don't feel like you're losing water until you've lost it. It just evaporates out of you and you feel good for a while and then you realize, I don't have any water left in me. It's a place at night that is freezing. You've got to have enough to keep you warm or you freeze to death when you have been boiling up all day. And even that turn from hot to cold beats and bangs at the body. The desert is a great leveler because what you have to get down to is basics. That is the point of the desert. It forces you to basics. You don't shave when you're in the desert. It becomes stupid after a while. You can't waste the water. Pretty soon you don't care about that. Secondly, in the desert, there's no way to stay clean. So pretty soon you're eating it, it's inside of you, it's in every part of your body, and pretty soon you don't care anymore. It's nice to watch how people sleep after a while. At first they're just nice about it, and pretty soon they get down in the dirt and sleep and nobody cares anymore. That's the desert. It breaks you down. In the desert, you don't carry a hairdryer. You can't. You just can keep the stuff you need because it's tiring. It's really tiring to work in the desert for a day. You want as much as you can just carry, enough to keep you warm at night and how much you can eat through it. Newcomers to the desert sit there dreaming of Big Macs. That's the first thing I'm going to do is get a milkshake. That's all they can think about. Now we go back and we can see that's exactly what happened to us. When we got out there, that's what we wanted. That's the one reaction, to get back and get to the Big Mac, because we are told that the people start to fuss about when they get out into the middle of all this mess. Did you notice the Big Mac passage? See, this is very typical. This happens all the time. They get out there, they cross over the Sea of Reeds. We get through this and you notice immediately comes the big problem. Exodus 16:3. Would that we had died by the hand of the Lord in the land of Egypt, when we sat by the flesh pots and we ate bread to the full. And here you have it. You brought us into this desert. There it is. That's the one thing. You want to go back to management. You want to go back to things that you've had and have it the way it was. That's the one thing that happens. The other thing that happens is also really amazing to me. It's usually the other parts of the group. Suddenly, people who are talking to you, you're going for a walk at night with the lights out and everything, and everybody is now down and calm and quiet in the middle of the desert. They're saying to you, you know, I finally figured out how really stupid it is that I have to carry my hairdryer with me all the time. How really asinine it has been, how I have fussed over whether we have a tomato or we don't have a tomato for dinner. You know, suddenly I understand that this isn't the point of it. And I'm perfectly happy here. I've got water, I've got food, and I feel free. And I go back and I'm going to go into a rat race about getting my hair blown out. There are these two ways of doing it. What does God do in the middle of this Yeshimon, this howling waste? He gives us manna. And what do you equate manna with? Dew. You see, it is simply the gift that is given for the day. The second thing about manna is that makes it so important, it is typical desert food. You get just enough of it for what you need for the day. It's ridiculous in the desert to get a whole bunch of grain. You can't carry that anywhere. You can't make possessions in the desert. Therefore, the most important line is Exodus 16:18. So they all go out, you see, and you can see exactly what they're doing the first day. They go out after this stuff. Everybody wants to try and outdo the other in the competition. One guy is going to bring in 10 barrels of this stuff. The other guy is going to bring in 20. And this poor woman is only going to have 2. So what in the end is that when they look down? He that gathered much had nothing. And he that gathered little had no lack. We have nothing. We lack nothing. You can't win, but you do win. That's the desert. And each gathered according to what he could eat. That's the point. And that takes us to Acts. Everybody came in. And whatever you could, you gave. It's the desert economy again, not Marxism. That's the desert life. You give what you have for everybody to get just enough as what you need. But it wasn't enough to have bread. They wanted meat. This is hard for Americans to understand, but you look at the land. Meat is not eaten by people in this world like we do. Look at the way he runs it out when he's talking about quail. God really gets upset with this one. Exodus 16, when he gives you the story of the quail, you will notice that what he does is he says, you will have not just food for one day, but you will have it for 2 days, 3 days. You will have meat for a month until you're sick of it. That's exactly what most societies don't have. It's what Americans have, but most societies don't have it. You eat beans, you eat vegetables. On the high country, you didn't have meat every day. You had eggs and cheese. But they want life in Egypt, where they have Big Macs every day at 20 cents a piece. So again, you get the contrast. God has given them everything. They get the buns in the morning, they get the meat at night, and they get practically everything to be happy. That isn't enough. For the next thing we do is we want water. The water is in cisterns, and there are places where they're like underground streams. You can literally hit it if you know where you're going, and you can get water out of rocks. It's still down there. The water is possible. What is most crucial to that is Numbers 20. It's the water from the rock. It just shows you not only that people get caught up, and it's not enough just to get it from God. We want to get our own possessions. And Moses himself gets caught in it because Moses gets so tired of everybody, and they now want water as if God wasn't going to give them water in the first place. In Numbers 25, it just says, "Why have you made us come out of Egypt to bring us to this evil place? It is no place for grain, figs, or vines, or pomegranates." Before they were worried about garlic and melons and all the stuff of Egypt. Now they just want the stuff of the Holy Land. That's the ultimate. Then, of course, God says, yes, strike the rod. And then this terrible line in 2010. "Hear now, you rebels, shall we bring forth water for you?" Suddenly Moses plays God. Shall we bring forth water to you? Leadership gets to his head, and he's controlling, he's giving, which is the exact opposite of what we're supposed to be learning. That's exactly like the pilgrim guide who is about had it and is trying to lead people on a spiritual pilgrimage, and they're still yakking out there. So you say, okay, I'll let you have the rest of all this stuff. Now, I'd like to talk more next time about the movement from the desert into the land of promise. Next time, I also want to spend more time answering your questions and seeing where this is all taking us in terms of who we are now. how we learn from being people of the desert.